face. I know you want to, Dee teased. Mona smiled. Only if I get to lead. The two of them stepped onto the floor, moving in sync to a beat they were only just beginning to understand. The journey of finding each other was far from over, but for the first time, the Thorne sisters weren't just half-sisters. They were whole. Two's company, three's a crowd, the Santa Monica Chronicles. Chapter 1, The Keeper of the Gates. The sun dipped low over the Santa Monica coastline, casting long, golden fingers across the stucco facades of the apartment complexes lining the shore. The air was thick with the scent of salt spray and the faint, greasy aroma of fish and chips from the nearby pier. At the Roper residence, located on the ground floor of a modest but well-kept building, the atmosphere was considerably less serene. Stanley Roper, a man whose fashion sense had peaked in 1954 and stayed there out of sheer spite, paced the living room. His brow was furrowed, his lips pursed in a permanent expression of fiscal anxiety. Stanley was a landlord by trade and a curmudgeon by calling. He viewed his tenants not as residents, but as ticking time bombs of property damage and late rent payments. "Be quiet, Helen," Stanley hissed, glancing toward the hallway. "You're gonna wake Karen." Helen Roper sat on the floral-patterned sofa, vigorously filing a nail that had betrayed her earlier that afternoon. She looked up, her eyes narrowing behind a pair of oversized, fashionable glasses. "Filing my nails is gonna wake up your niece. Stanley, don't be ridiculous." "It's not the filing, it's the breaking," Stanley retorted, his voice rising despite his own warning. "Every time you break a nail, you swear loud enough to wake the dead. That's probably what got you up in the first place." Helen sighed, a sound of long-suffering endurance. "Just hold it down, will you? The poor girl flew in all the way from New York. She's exhausted. You've heard of jet lag, haven't you?" Stanley snorted. "Heard of it? I married it. You've been in a state of suspended animation since the Ford administration." "Very funny, Stanley. Truly," Helen said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "But seriously, Karen is trying to adjust to a new time zone. And more importantly, she's trying to adjust to living the life of a nun under your roof." Stanley stopped pacing and turned to face his wife, his thumbs tucked into his waistband. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you never let her out of your sight. You're more like her jailer than her uncle. The girl is young, beautiful, and in the most exciting city in the world. And what have you done? You've treated her like a high-security prisoner." "That's ridiculous," Stanley protested, throwing his hands up. "She's having a good time. I've been a model host." "She's having a boring time, Stanley. Capital B, boring. Boring. How can you say that?" Stanley's voice hit a pitch that threatened the structural integrity of the windows. "Didn't I take her to Disneyland? Didn't I take her to the museum? Didn't I walk out to the end of the pier with her and watch the bait shop close? And every night, I sit her down and tell her about my experiences in the war. You call that boring? Helen didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her head had dropped to her chest, her eyes closed, a soft, rhythmic snore escaping her lips. Ellen, Stanley barked, Ellen. Ellen jerked awake, blinking rapidly. Oh, sorry, Stanley. I must have drifted off. I think I reached the part where you were explaining the strategic importance of the mess hall in 1944. Stanley scowled. Look, I promised my brother I'd take good care of her, and that's just what I'm doing. This city is crawling with freaks, weirdos, and perverts. It's my job to protect her. I wasn't talking about your friends, Stanley, Helen quipped. I just hope you don't make a crack like that in front of Karen. You'll give her the wrong idea of her uncle. I think she has the right idea of me, Stanley grumbled, though a flicker of doubt crossed his face. He looked up at the ceiling, toward apartment 201. What about the kids upstairs? Maybe I should let her meet them. Helen stopped filing. You mean the roommates, Patty, Maxine, and Tinker Bell? Stanley frowned at the nicknames. He still hadn't quite wrapped his head around the living arrangement upstairs. To girls Jeanne, the sensible one who worked at the flower shop, and Chrissy, the blonde secretary who seemed to live in a perpetual state of cheerful confusion, and Jack Tripper. To Stanley, Jack was a special kind of guy. He had to be, otherwise, Stanley never would have allowed a man to move in with two single women. He was convinced Jack was, let's say, not interested in the feminine charms of his roommates. It was the only way Stanley's moral compass could point north. Actually, Stanley said, a slow, devious grin spreading across his face. That's not a bad idea. If she goes out with Jack, it's like sending her out in an armored truck. He's the safest date in California. Helen looked at her husband with a mixture of pity and amusement. Oh, Stanley, you really are a visionary in your own mind. Chapter 2. The Jimmy Cake and the Baker's Dilemma. Upstairs in apartment 201, the atmosphere was significantly more frantic. It was Jana Wood's birthday, and Jack Tripper was determined to make it a culinary triumph. Jack was a student at the local cooking school, a man who could turn a simple omelet into a Broadway production, usually involving at least one tripped-over rug and a minor grease fire. Jack burst through the front door, balancing a white bakery box with the precarious grace of a tightrope walker. Hey, I got Jean its birthday cake. Chrissy Snow emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a floral apron. Her blonde hair was tied back, and she wore a look of intense concentration. Oh, good. Where's the birthday girl? She's in the kitchen, Jack whispered, even though Jana wasn't there. Keeping an eye on the birthday dinner I started. Who's keeping an eye on her? I am, Jana called out, stepping into the living room. She was the anchor of the group, organized, pragmatic, and currently suspicious. Jack jumped, nearly dropping the box. Oh, you shouldn't sneak up like that. Shauna